The fact that you cannot grow a beard is a deal breaker.
17 and a half hours in a steel tube. Your kids are going to pick up on what you value.
The world is different, and they are all created in the image of God.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Courageous Conversations. I'm joined once again by friend and coworker, in that order, Jonathan Bernhardt, and we are here to have a wonderful, courageous conversation about the country of Ethiopia, and not just the country itself, but our mission trip that we will most likely be on when you're listening to this episode. So obviously this is pre-recorded because we are not sitting in a random almost closet at Briarcrest and in Ethiopia at the same time. But we are super excited about this trip. This is a trip we've been planning for about 15 months? It was when I first approached you in the Briarcrest weight room as I was sitting in the back office hiding, trying to buy airplane tickets on Ethiopian Air. And you just mentioned to me, hey, if you ever need somebody to go, I was like, in fact, I do need someone to come with me. So here's what I'd love. Here's how I'd love for us to start. I'd love for us to start with you just kind of sharing a little bit just about missions in general, because unlike you, I have not lived on the mission field and worked internationally for the cause of Christ. I have traveled somewhat internationally, but never had the exposure that you have had. So just in general, just a little bit of your missions resume, and then we'll talk a little bit about Ethiopia, and then I think how this applies to all Christians this summer and beyond, whether or not they're traveling abroad.
So kind of looking back to my past and travel history, missional work, I actually didn't do a lot of international missions and stuff in high school. In college, I did domestic missions, and then after I graduated, I got my first teaching job in Lima, Peru. I served there for 2 years as a missionary, as a teacher. But while I was in college, I did take one summer stint to Saudi Arabia. And wasn't there in the official missionary capacity, was there to teach English as a second language. However, used that as an opportunity to kind of like see what that would look like living abroad and just what it would look like to talk to people, particularly Muslims, about my faith, which gets a little tricky in some of those countries because of some of the consequences for that. Actually, fun story, instead of Lima, Peru, my first job that I actually tried to go for international missions was Kabul, Afghanistan. That was actually my number one was Kabul. My number two was Ankara, Turkey. And then my number three was Lima, Peru. And I interviewed everything. I don't know if I've told you this, but I interviewed and everything for the Kabul job and was super pumped. Really thought I was going to have it because I thought surely no one else is applying for this job because the list of people who want to go to Kabul, Afghanistan back in 2011 was probably low.
Sure.
And then I got told no. And here's why. They said, can you grow a beard? And I said, no, I cannot. I didn't realize that was part of the job description. They're like, well, it's an Islamic nation. Yeah. If you can't grow a beard as an adult male, then you will not be respected. You will not be seen. You will not be heard. None of these things. So they're like, the fact that you cannot grow a beard is a deal breaker.
That is crazy.
And to this day, I still cannot grow a beard.
That's a real bummer.
I have real bad beard envy right now. Every time I look at people with beards, I'm like, can't grow a beard. So that's always my thing. I know that the Lord will call me to missions in predominantly Islamic countries when he allows me to grow a beard.
When the facial hair starts to come in.
I'll wake up one day like Santa Claus, Tim Allen Santa Claus, then I'll know.
Yeah, then it'll be like, wow, Bernhardt's going on the mission field. It was nice knowing you.
Yeah. So anyway, since then I've gone to Ecuador with you.
Yeah.
Through the school, and then Ethiopia last year for recon, which was an amazing experience. Ethiopia is such a unique, just culturally robust country, and I'm super pumped to go back with kids.
Well, this year is going to be a lot of fun. We've got 12 students who are coming with us and one other chaperone. Yep. And she's a rock star for putting up with for us and whatever's going to come with this. But I just remember a little bit of backstory behind even where the trip came from. My predecessor at this job here at Briarcrest, Director of Student Ministries, moved over to Ethiopia, and he has been working there for a number of years. And he came home, or back to the States rather, and I was spending some time with him. And he said, hey, you've got to come just spend a week with me and just experience this. And he was like, and he was the one who helped pioneer the Ecuador trip. And he's like, I know what Ecuador is. Ecuador is great. We also have an Ecuador mission trip, and we're doing 2 of those this summer, those are also amazing. But he's like, this is just a totally different feel, totally different experience. You get your perspective of God's kingdom and what the gospel is doing around the world is just grown exponentially because you're literally on the other side of the planet. Yeah. To the point, I remember last year on the flight, we were on this 14-hour flight from Chicago O'Hare to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and he wakes up with 6 hours left and looks at me and goes, "We've only got 2 hours left, right?" And I go, "Nah, bro, it's like 6." He goes, "Oh," and just put his head back down on his tray table.
Yes.
It's a brutal flight, but I mean, you are definitely outside of your comfort zone. But when my buddy told me, "Hey, come over and check out what the Lord's doing over here," I had this thought in the back of my brain. I was like, "Huh, that sounds interesting." And to be honest, we have so much demand for our short-term trips in the high school. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got 10% of our high schoolers approximately, maybe a little less, are going on a short-term mission trip this summer.
Wow.
It allows for us to take more students on mission trips this summer. Over the summer, rather. And so I just assumed, hey, let's go check this thing out and see what it is. And so me and you booked some tickets and got on an airplane, and we literally only spent 4.5 days in country. Like we landed.
Well, it takes a day and a half to get there.
Correct.
Like on the calendar, on the clock and everything. Literally, you take off on a day, you get there 2 days later.
Which was as long as our wives would allow us to do that. That's what we got blessed from a Sunday to a Sunday. And so we were like, okay. But we got over there, and immediately, I think both of us just could feel the Lord stir in our hearts, like this is something that is truly going to be special. And so just as far as knowing that backstory, you know, if we've got listeners or viewers who are taking all of this in while we're literally there, how can they be praying for us while we're there? What are some things that you think of just as far as they're petitioning the Lord, like we're on the other side of the planet serving, like how can they be involved in that trip through prayer?
Yeah, well, I think anytime you look at short-term missions in particular, there's prayer for the impact that the students are making on the community they're serving, but also prayer for the students themselves.
Yeah,
and I think that's really a big reason why we do this with the students in particular, is to get them out there to see the world, to see how big the world is and all of the pieces of God's creation. And so I think in terms of prayer, it's both praying for the impact on our students, what they'll bring home, how they can kind of run with their faith afterwards, and be kind of like set ablaze, if you will, to really kind of have that going into college, because they're all seniors, or former seniors. They graduated on
they graduated. Yeah, they graduated.
So to take that kind of like passion into college with them, but then also to impact the community, both the school that we'll be serving at, as well as the public school that in the community, which we talked about as a hodgepodge mix of Ethiopian Orthodox. You have mixes of the old school kind of animists. You have Muslims, and so just seeing that kind of diverse, like how do you really witness effectively to those different groups, but just the impact there, the soil there is fertile, I think, for that impact. And so that's I think the 2 biggest things to prayer, and then of course just safety.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and
make
travel,
sure we leave with everyone to come back with the same amount of people.
For sure. Well, and just the travel, like the flight back, 17 and a half hours in a steel tube.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, and the fortunate thing is we're not expecting the plane to be full, and we were able to stretch out last year. But I mean, if it is, I mean, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of time.
On the way there, if you remember, I did not have my own row.
That's true.
So I had to just sit like a normal, for 14. That was rough.
So, okay, let me ask you a different question, because some of our listeners, viewers might have never either considered going on a short-term trip, or they've thought about it, but it's not something that's on their kind of priority list or radar. You and I have the advantage of working at a place where these opportunities make themselves available to us on a semi-regular basis. I mean, it's part of my job. So like I'm at least some part of my summer is going to be spent on doing something to this effect. But for the person who, it doesn't have this on their radar, what are some of the benefits of just going, like just how have you seen the Lord maybe grow you personally through short-term trips? Because we talk a lot about going and serving. And I do think that when we go, we serve And these students are going to serve tirelessly, but in a lot of ways, what we're doing is we're coming alongside and supporting an already existing ministry, being a little bit of wind in their sails and being helpful. We're not starting something new. We're there to serve the missionaries in whatever capacity they need us to serve. And the people who are, for instance, live in Ethiopia, have given their lives to the Lord and are like, for instance, our driver who is also in charge of Downline Ethiopia. And I just a couple minutes ago got a picture of the graduating class of Downline Ethiopia.
Oh.
And so there's some people over there right now. So there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of things that you see, but maybe for the person who's on the sidelines, has never considered it, or is curious or intrigued by it, but maybe needs a little push of courage. Hey, did you see what I did there? Because it's Courageous Conversations. What would you say to them?
Honestly, I would say start something that's easier. I probably wouldn't start with Ethiopia as my first mission trip, or somewhere halfway across the world that's such a ethnically diverse and multicultural language challenges, like all those things. But again, that's why I love that we have the Ecuador trip too, because that's a kind of monocultural. They have one language. It's a language our students are familiar with. It's a culture they're familiar with, and so it's a nice kind of transition to kind of get their foot into missions. And again, all the students going to Ethiopia have been on the Ecuador trip, so they've had that exposure. I would definitely recommend something that's maybe a little bit lighter for that first missions trip. But definitely get out there. Again, you can find trips that are 10 days or less, 7 days, just to kind of see, not again, what it is you're missing. That's not the right way to say that. But the idea of just getting out there to kind of expose yourself to the ways God can use you. I think sometimes that we unwittingly put God into a box. To be like, this is the area God has me to serve, and so I will serve in this area, not thinking that how much more can he make an impact with you throughout the different parts of the globe. And so again, not that saying this is my area, this is where I'm going to serve domestically is a bad thing. We should be thinking about that. How does God have you in your workplace, and how can he use you in that moment? But also think about, like, he can use you anywhere. There are people all across this globe who need to hear the gospel.
Well, and I've seen a bunch of memes that are kind of making fun of Christians who neglect, their sphere of influence here to do international missions, and that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We need to be loving our wives and raising up our kids and being faithful here and serving in our communities. But in addition to those things, and the reason I think this is helpful is that if you look at the scriptures, I'm going to just read one verse that I don't want to call any verse in the Bible obscure, but oftentimes, if you turn to the book of Romans, this is not the verse you're turning to, but in the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 5, it says, talking about Jesus Christ, our Lord, through whom we have received grace and apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among the nations. And so that is a picture of the fact. And then also it goes down and he says in verse 8 of the same chapter, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. So Paul had this vision where he, of course, cared about everybody where he was, but he also recognized that in the same way that we're seeing students come alive in their faith here in Eads, Tennessee, that's happening in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Oh, yeah.
And the context could not be more different unless we were on Mars. Like, it's just a totally different culture. And once again, that's not wrong. It's just different. But yet the same gospel is going into a totally different culture as is going into our culture and transform. And that allows for us to see so much bigger than just our kind of finite little, sphere of world that we're in right now. And so I'm personally excited about that. And just, for all of those things, I would reiterate, like, the prayer aspect of, if you're listening to this and we're over and the dates are June 1st to 11th, right? Like, that's when we're out. So, like, if you're listening to this then, I would encourage you to be praying for us. I think that would be an amazing thing. And once again, be praying for our students, because I know for me, like, I go on these trips and I come back a changed person.
Oh, yeah.
And normally it's because I see our students serve and grow in their faith. And so it gets them so outside of their comfort zone. So the last question I'll ask you, and I think this will be, this will kind of help tie the gospel bow. So you and I are both in the same stage. We got young kids, and I'm looking at my two young kids, or 4 young kids. You've got 2, I've got 4. But like, we're looking at our kids, and we're sitting here, and I said 2, and I'm thinking of you, and I'm like, wait, how many do I got? I forgot my kids. No, and I'm thinking, all right, how do I get the gospel in front of them? Now, clearly, they go to a Christian school. We're taking them to church, all the things. things. They're hearing about Jesus. But like, how can they have these experiences or these moments or just this kind of clarity of what the gospel is? And short-term missions is something that's definitely on my radar, especially as they get older.
Yeah.
It's hard to take like a 4-year-old on a short-term mission trip. I mean, I'm sure it's been done, but that's probably not ideal. It's probably just, it probably is better to wait a little while. But just as someone who is raising kids, and maybe we're talking to the parents of older kids. So maybe you've got late elementary school, middle school, high school kids, or even college kids, and they're coming home for the summer, and you're like, man, what's something we could do as a family? Why do you think a short-term mission trip might be a good option for them? Because it's an investment. Like these trips cost money. These flights cost money. These hostels and hotels and all, it all costs money. So why make the investment?
Well, and I really like the idea of being able to have those conversations with my kids. Yeah. Like telling, my 6-year-old or my 4-year-old, like, hey, like, daddy's going to be gone for, 11 days, 10 days. Here's what I'm going to be doing. Here's where I'm going to be. We'll look at the globe. We'll point. We'll talk about like how far the trek is. We'll look at the map, and we'll, usually bring back like a trinket or something too, just so they can kind of get a visual a little bit too. But that idea of them seeing and knowing that it's a priority, that we are doing these things to serve, to go and send forth the gospel to the different parts of the world. And then as they get older, to then start doing those things with them. Like, as they get to an age where they can be a little bit more serving rather than being served, and then getting them domestically to just help locally, and then, kind of branching those circles out more and more to again, show the influence and emphasis on missions and how important that is. And then who knows, one day inspire them to be missionaries themselves. Yeah. I have friends who are currently serving overseas missionaries. I have some who have planted churches here just in the States. There's a tremendous amount of building that foundation of showing what's important, and again, and where you invest your time and money is into the things you value. Yeah. So the idea being, say, hey, we're in our family, we're going to value missions, we're going to value sending forth the gospel to the different parts of the world, and here's how we're going to do that. So I think that's just a really good example to set, because again, those little kids, man, they will just copy and paste, right? Everything you do, they'll mimic, they'll imitate. I get with the professional development we went on a few months ago, talked about how Christianity is caught, right, as much as it's taught. Yes. And so I love that. I love that my kids get to see that this is what's happening. And again, hopefully one day we can maybe get a family trip, maybe not to Ethiopia, maybe Ecuador. Yes. But yeah, like the idea of to go ahead and get those kids exposed at a younger age to some of these things, I think would be really, really cool. Well, and I love, because I think both of our families are all in when it comes to Christian education, and both in Ecuador and Ethiopia, we are serving at Christian schools. And so that helps, reiterate what we're talking about. And so, if you're the parent out there who's trying to figure out how to jump into this stuff, like figuring out like what the Lord has gifted you and given you a heart for as far as service and ministry is concerned, and then plugging in, because there, even locally here in Memphis, there are so many service opportunities and so many opportunities to pour your life out. And so your kids are going to pick up on what you value. And at the end of the day, and I'll say this, and then we'll wrap it up. I'll give you any last thoughts if you have some before we wrap up the podcast. But at the end of the day, I love the thought of looking at Christ through the lens of going on a mission trip, because we get uncomfortable, we leave home, we go to a place that's unfamiliar, and that's exactly what Jesus did to come and rescue us. Yep. And so as we are on a mission trip, we get a taste of maybe a little bit of the getting outside of our comfort zone, the courage it would have taken Jesus to leave home to come to earth. Now, we obviously don't die for the sins of humanity. But we get a teeny tiny taste of the fact that we must be really loved because someone was willing to go through something so uncomfortable for us. And so any last words of encouragement to our families or young adults who might be listening to this as far as mission trips are concerned? Yeah, really to not just the parents of the students on the trip, but even to students who are maybe younger, who are thinking about going on the Ethiopia or Ecuador trip later. Just the idea of getting out there and seeing the world, seeing that like the world is different, right? Every culture has its unique language, its nuances, and they are all created in the image of God. And so they even worship God in different ways and praise him in different ways. It just looks different. It sounds different. And so I always think the idea of, if you really want to know what heaven's going to be like and what that worshiping and glorifying the Lord is going to be like. If you get into missions, you'll have a better exposure to that because you will see how the different peoples and the different groups all do these things. And again, like you said before, it's different. And so a lot of times people are like, whoa, but it is such a beautiful thing to see these different people worshiping kind of in their own cultural, unique way.
Yeah, well, and a little bit of evangelism. I'll end with this. When we were over there in Ethiopia, we were just kind of there to observe and to scout and all of those things. What ends up happening is one afternoon, the lady who is running this one program looks at us and goes, "Hey, do you want to teach John chapter 4?" It's like, sure, why not? We're here.
No, I think the question was when.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, yeah, sure. When do you want to start? She goes, oh, no, right now. We are walking to the building where you will lead the Bible study. So like in 90 seconds, got it.
And unfortunately, that is a passage that is, a familiar one. It's the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well. But then you're sitting there, and I'm reading out of my English Bible to some students who are not well versed in English,
right.
And yet we got a translator. And we're going back and forth, and we're just talking about Jesus. And it's a really cool experience to get to have that because you're seeing, hey, this gospel that applies to me here applies there. And you think about some of them maybe have met Christ. That's what heaven's going to look like. So it's a beautiful thing. Well, hopefully hopefully you guys will consider these things and be thinking about just how service and missions could possibly, or God could be calling you to those things. But we are, once again, Jonathan, super excited that they joined us here in the Courageous Conversations podcast, Ethiopia Mission Trip Edition. And we hope that you will like, subscribe. Hey, comment below if there's anything you want us to riff about on the podcast. We are always open to suggestions on that. And we hope to see you again soon here on the Courageous Conversations podcast.